What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Taking the Pin podcast. And we've got a lot to get through, lots of news to get through, lots of stuff to talk about with the shows. But before we get into that, let's throw it to my commander-in-chief, Bragster. How are you doing this week?
I'm good. It's been one of those sort of busy weeks, you know, the classic ones. I've got a new bed that last week I was halfway through building when recording the podcast, and now I've actually got a bed, so that's fun. But yeah, it just been a busy bee, you know, just
as you do,
going wild, you know.
Yes, your wild weeks of building beds.
Oh, honestly, they're gonna write books about this.
Don't want to know what sort of books they are, to be fair. Yeah, well,
There
glad you're
50 Shades, that's for sure.
Jesus Christ. What a start to the podcast.
Oh, it's a great one.
Yeah.
How are you, Grimmy?
Yeah, not building beds. Went to see some relatives over the weekend, who are doing well, so yeah, all good. Not much else to report really, which is often quite nice not to have some sort of drama going on, which is lovely. But speaking of drama, nice little segue there. There's been some releases in the wrestling world, and usually it's just WWE releasing anyone that they please at the time, but we actually have some stuff from AEW to get through as well. So, with that being said, I'll quickly run through the names that we've got on the release list, and then we'll get into our thoughts on that as well. So, we'll start with WWE. So, we've had Duke Hudson, Paul Ellering and the Authors of Pain, Cedric Alexander, Sonya Deville, Blair Davenport, Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows, Isla Dawn, Giovanni Vinci, and Elektra Lopez have all been released in the matter of days in this week. So, yeah, quite a lot of names there. Some that I'm sure a lot of you will recognize, and maybe a couple who maybe you're not too familiar with. But again, I'm pretty familiar with all of them, in all honesty.
Well, all of which, for apart from Duke, I mean, all of which are main roster people. You know, it's usually there's a mix between NXT and main roster people, but this is just all main roster. With a lot of the reports coming out that the reason why is because they're actually making room for the NXT talent to sort of make their way up, and make room on the roster. But yeah, I felt like since Triple H taken over, we've had drabbles of releases. We've never really had like a full-blown here's a bunch of releases. I could be completely wrong, but it's definitely not felt like that.
It's not been like what you would usually see under the Vince era, where it was 15, 20 names randomly on any given Monday could go. This has definitely been the biggest pot of wrestlers that have been released. I think you are right there.
Yeah, it's a weird. It was one of those where it caught everyone off guard. There was no like, oh, by the way, there's going to be some, because Duke Hudson happened, and everyone was like, oh, that's a shame. And what no one expected was that later on, that would mean that more was on its way. It's. I mean, I guess we'll go through the AEW ones as well, and then we can have a big overall view of everything then.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of AEW, there's not as many releases, but probably I would say bigger names, I would say, than maybe the ones that got released for WWE. You had Malakai Black, Miro, and Ricky Starks all released from AEW. Again, big names there, left, right, and center. So, yeah, again, thoughts on the releases as a whole for both WWE and AEW? Like, are you surprised by the names mentioned, or?
I'm not, and I am. And that's a terrible answer. But in terms of AEW, I'm not at all. Looking at it, Malakai Black, it's been very obvious he's not been happy for a while, and it's very much looks like he's been on his way out. Obviously, that one is more of a contract ending than a full-blown release, but he's still obviously been let go of his contract. Then having Miro go, who hasn't wrestled since the end of 2023. Funnily enough, his final ever match was against Andrade.
Yeah.
which was Andrade's last match in AEW. So that's quite an interesting one there. And Miro's very much a weird one in AEW where like everything looked like it was going in a positive direction. The next thing he'd be taken off TV, and then he wouldn't appear for a while, then he would appear, and then he'd disappear. It was very weird. There's been a lot of creative differences. I mean, you can blame one or the other. I mean, very similar can be said about Ricky Starks. It felt like the sky was the limit. Obviously, then ever since sort of Cody left, everyone's always murmured that maybe he'll make the jump.
Yeah.
Then they gave Ricky Starks. I think they gave him. I could be wrong, but I think they might have given him the Owen Hart Cup, but I can't remember. But they definitely gave him a tournament win. And he got big loads of pyro, and it was like quite comedic how much pyro he got. And then it just felt like, I don't know, just things just seemed to tail off. They went from being really hot on him to nothing. And again, there was apparently creative differences. He asked for his release last year. It was told no. He then wasn't used on TV. And then I think eventually they've just decided, fine, we'll release you. In terms of WWE, I mean, it's the sad realities. Not one surprised me. Really. The only one possibly surprising me was Sonya Deville. The main reason being I've always seen Sonya Deville as a WWE woman. I've never seen her as anything else. I've always thought that she was going to be in that company for pretty much the rest of her career. She proved time and time again she can do it in the ring. She can do it outside the ring in a managerial role. And she can also do it as a GM role as well. She was almost the complete package of, almost in a similar sense to someone like Natalya, who's just a safe pair of hands who, is just never going to leave. I really felt that Sonya was the same. So that one really sort of surprised me. In terms of everyone else, I mean, unfortunately, they don't. They've not been used on TV. If they have, it's been sparingly.
Yeah.
With very little push. I mean, the one that excites me the most, which is weird to say with releases, and obviously we wish them all the best. The one that excites me the most, and I think is actually a good thing for this person, is Cedric Alexander. Yeah. I think Cedric's about to have the run of his career. Cedric's still quite very young, and he's got a certain faction in AEW called the Hurt Syndicate that's just waiting for him. And I think AEW can let him off the leash, similar to what we've seen with Ricochet recently, where he's sort of been able to go. In my honest opinion, I think the sky's the limit with Cedric. I've always liked Cedric. Cedric's character work is very underrated. People just look at him in the ring. He's got a very impressive finisher in the lumbar check. He is very, very good, and people forget that he's actually very good at the character work as well. And yeah, I think the sky's the limit for him. Personally, I think he will not have any trouble whatsoever. I don't think many of these people will, but I think with him, it's actually a beneficial move rather than you've been released from your contract type thing. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think the ones that I've been surprised by were probably the same as you with Sonya, because again, she was in the faction with Shayna and Toni Storm. Not Toni Storm.
Not Toni Storm. She's in a different company.
She's a different company.
It is Zoe Stark.
Zoe Stark, that's the one. ST, that was what was tripping me up. So with her being in that faction, I was thinking, oh, well, they're probably cruising along and doing their thing. And Cedric was sort of used in and out of time. He wasn't really there consistently. And I felt for a while, like you say, with the faction essentially waiting for him in AEW, it was kind of only a matter of time before he ended up there, probably. But everyone else, we've not really seen them. And again, Karl Anderson, Luke Gallows is a strange one to me, because not in the sense that they've been released, but in the sense of how it's not worked out for them either time they've been there. Like, they've been obviously backups to AJ through different periods of the timeline, but like they've never really been utilized properly, and I don't know why, because obviously we've seen them in New Japan and on the indies, and they've been great for the most part. Like, there was a reason why WWE signed them. But yeah, everyone else, it's not really a surprise. In terms of AEW, I think the natural reaction to the three of them is that they're going to be in WWE at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is probably the one I'm most excited about is seeing Malakai back
Mm-hmm.
in WWE, because I do think Triple H will use him properly, and
Mm-hmm.
we will get the NXT version of Black that we've seen. And I think if we get a main roster run with him in, we're going to have some pretty spectacular moments and matches that really we should have seen in AEW, but they, like a lot of wrestlers, have underutilized them at various points. Again, it's the same with Miro. I think with Miro, we could see a proper Rusev run. Whether he goes back to being Rusev or if he comes in as Miro, we'll see.
I am torn with this one, and I said it to my friend. I've got a feeling he might not come back.
Well, there's every chance, yeah.
I remember hearing rumors in that, like, basically he wasn't that interested in carrying on, and he was quite happy with his life outside of wrestling, and that could just be that he lost his passion while in AEW and
Yeah.
he'll regain it in WWE, or it could be that he is actually pretty much done. As I said, he hasn't wrestled since 2020, end of 2023. Is that because he doesn't want to, or is that because there was no creative plans? I don't know, but I think, it wouldn't surprise me if Miro just goes off now into the distance.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I do think the lure of being used properly by Triple H and Co will be a big pull. Like, I think if they come up to him and say, this is the plan, with the way WWE are at the minute and how as hot as they are, that's going to be very difficult to turn down. And I know there was discussions with Black maybe being discontented with what was going on at AEW and maybe looking to call it a day for a while. But again, WWE is its own machine right now, and it's on a whole other level in terms of success and sort of popularity that, again, even like a couple of years in there on a decent run, you're probably getting remembered for years to come. So, yeah, I do think there's a big pull there for both of them. Whether we see them will remains to be seen. One guy I would expect, obviously, is Ricky Starks to be in WWE by the summer, if not sooner. We may not see him because of no compete clauses or whatever. I don't know how it works, obviously, in terms of if your contract runs out or if you've been terminated. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but Starks will be in there sooner rather than later. He's got people in the company who will vibe for him, and he's already known well by a lot of people. You've got Punk and Cody on your side, two of the biggest players right now in WWE. He'll be there sooner rather than later, I would imagine.
And he'll go straight to NXT. I think that makes the most sense. Go to NXT, build his name and character, make it familiar to the WWE fans, because even the WWE fans who keep an eye on AEW might have forgotten what his character is and forgotten what he's like. It's not like he has been wrestling with AEW for recently and now is coming back. This like a Penta, for example, who everyone was really excited for and had been wrestling recently for them. This is someone who's been away for a long time, whose character isn't as easy as this is the greatest luchador. Just watch what he does in the ring. Ricky Starks is a deeper character than that. And I think putting him on NXT, which has a very slim main event division right now, especially if Trick Williams goes up to the main roster, I think that is where Ricky Starks can shine for just over a year or so, and then can make his way up to the main roster.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, being under the wing of HBK for a year is no bad thing for any up-and-coming wrestler. So, yeah, it'll be great to see what happens with them. Any more thoughts on the releases there, Bragster, or was there anything else you had?
No, I just think that, obviously, we all want to see them do really good stuff, and this is nowhere near the end for these guys. This is, look at Cody, look at Drew, look at Punk. These are guys who stepped away, came back, and I know Punk's different, but they still stepped away. They were still gone from their contract and then ended up coming back. This is this is not the end of the road. This is, for a lot of these people, especially the younger ones, like, the Vinci's, the Isla Dawns and stuff, the Electra Lopez, this is just the beginning. They've just got to find the thing that then, gets them back into that spotlight, and into a big company again, if they don't go straight into one.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, hope, it's sad, but hopefully this gets turned into a positive 6 months or so down the line when we see them all doing really good stuff on the indies and in the bigger promotions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, the biggest example I can sort of point to in recent memory is one that surprised me that he got released was Baron Corbin. Like, he got released, and I was kind of like, well, I understood it to a certain extent, but even then I kind of was like, well, look at his recent run with Braun in NXT, and then the reactions he was getting on the main roster. And I think the problem with Corbin was that he got sullied a little bit with Vince's booking, and he didn't really get to show what he could do. And then sort of that year span when he did gave him that popularity, but then he got sort of cut off when they didn't have anything else for him. So, and he's going to GCW and wrestling there and fighting in Bloodsport and all that stuff. And he says he wants to keep doing it. And I fully believe he's one of those that'll be back at some point. But I think the next year or so he'll go out and spread his wings a bit. So hopefully they can follow a similar path to him and take it from there. So yeah, that's where we'll leave it for the releases. And we'll get into our weekly roundup. Right then, let's get into the weekly roundup and start from the very beginning. So we'll get into Dynamite, and we've got Bragster here once again, our AEW champion, as he were. We'll not get him a belt, and if it is, it'll only be a belt that holds up your trousers, nothing else. So let's go with Dynamite and get into it. So Bragster, what were the main highlights of Dynamite this week?
Well, it was actually quite a busy one, which, AEW this week has been extremely busy. We kicked off quite hot with some like cold opens, very similar to what WWE have been doing recently and what we see on Collision, but it's not very known for Dynamite. And then we end up having this big... Jay White comes out, talks about his relationship with Cope. The Death Riders come out. There ends up being a big brawl, as we've all used to. And then Cope goes... I issued a challenge to you, Moxley. What are you going to say? Revolution, you and me. Moxley says no. Classic heel move. Then Jay White went, fine, I'll issue a better challenge. Me and Cope versus you, Moxley, and Claudio Castagnoli in a Brisbane brawl in Australia next week. It's made official. That's your tag match at Grand Slam. For me, I think it's very obvious that Cope might end up pinning Moxley in that match. And that's then what makes Moxley say yes, is the fact that Moxley doesn't like it when he gets one-upped. He's going to get one-upped, and then he's going to say yes, is what I think is going to happen. I don't care that it's predictable. It will be really good. And I love a no DQ match. Love it. We then had Buddy Matthews and Okada confirmed as well for Grand Slam. There's a lot of confirmations this week of different matches.
Yeah.
We then had Ospreay versus a member of the Don Callis family. This is quite interesting because it ended up being Mark Davis, a member of United Empire, who obviously used to tag with Will Ospreay. But what you can tell is Mark Davis is very conflicted. That is a running theme of the week. And there's a promo afterwards where Kenny Omega comes out and tells Mark Davis, if you ever need a helping hand, there are friends around, and basically hints at him at Ospreay. So it's interesting that they've added a new member, but he's really conflicted. I really like that, and that it's been put over really well here. So I'm not sure where they're going with it, but I'm excited to see what happens. We then have the Hurt Syndicate cut a promo, and who are they interrupted by? But the Guns, the Ass Boys themselves, interrupted the Hurt Syndicate and basically said that, we want our titles back. Give us back our titles. Let's go. It's then confirmed that the match is for next week. So we've got a tag title match next week. I was really hoping that maybe there's shenanigans next week, but I'm hoping that might be the Revolution match, because I think that'd be a really, really good match between the two of them. And they're even referred to as the Ass Boys, and they end up embracing it. They're like, yes, we are the Ass Boys. Damn right we're the Ass Boys. And the crowd go wild. So we're actually seeing a face version of the Guns. We've seen a heel version for so long.
Yeah.
And we're going to finally see a face version. I'm really intrigued to see how they do this. I'm so used to them being assholes that it's going to be weird to see them be nice and be popular for once, but they are just cool. People will call them Nepo babies, but they have earned their right to be on that card. Trust me. Then we have Harley Cameron have a promo with the Mercedes Moné puppet, which has become a regular on TV. The reason I mention this is because Mercedes Moné comes out again after Harley Cameron's like, I'm going to be in concert on Collision. And Mercedes Moné basically calls her a loser. And as she walks away, Harley Cameron sticks her middle finger up to Mercedes Moné. And Renee Paquette is dragging down her arm. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't piss her off. It's so funny. Harley Cameron, again, is just comedy gold. We then have an interesting moment with Hangman, where basically Hangman basically says that, last week was a moment of weakness where he's walking around all the locker rooms, ends up walking into Swerve's locker room. He was like, that's a moment of weakness. Max Caster then interrupts and goes, when am I going to get my moment? When am I going to get my promo? Like, the best wrestler alive over here. And basically then goes, well, Hangman, you like murdering people. Why don't you go after Anthony Bowens and Billy Gunn? That'd be great. Yeah. And then well, they're not here, but you are. And then then Hangman goes after Max Caster. The reason I mention that is because that's coming back later on. We then have the Hounds of Hell versus Fletcher and Takeshita. I found this match really interesting for the fact of Hounds of Hell have just renamed themselves, rebranded themselves, and then you got Fletcher and Takeshita who are in a big match next week. So, this week technically, but at the time, it was next week. But so I found it interesting that you don't really want either of these two to lose.
Yeah.
But this was a brilliant match, absolutely outstanding. You had Brody King hitting a crossbody into. So they set two chairs up next to the barricade. Brody King crossbody into both Takeshita and Fletcher up against the barricade. Really nice stuff. The crowd chant one more time, and in classic wrestling fashion, he does it one more time.
Yeah,
it's beautiful stuff. Really, really good. I literally put here, it's just showing off both teams. It's showing how good these two are. One of which being a more fully fledged tag team than the other. But Brody King is sectioned off for the majority of the match. There's a lot of suicide dives going back and forth. Okada then causes a distraction with his music hitting while Buddy Matthews is up, and you're thinking, this is the finish of the match. Psych. No, it wasn't. And it then just continued, which I also liked. I liked the fact that the distraction led to the heels getting the upper hand, but it didn't lead to the victory, which I quite enjoy. Where there's a bit of tension there, but it doesn't actually lead to the end of the match.
Yeah.
The Hounds of Hell nearly win, but it's ended up being kicked out of, and then there's a major near fall after Buddy Matthews was kicked out. They plant Brody King. Brody King kicks out, but then eventually the family get the victory. Really, really good stuff. Great match. We then have Joe and Hook take out Nick Wayne's Kip Sabian backstage. Then we have an MJF promo, and this is where Hangman gets involved. Again, there's another interaction between MJF and Hangman. It's getting really, really interesting. MJF, a great line, is saying AEW is meant to be all elite wrestling, not all elderly wrestling. Why is Jeff Jarrett here? Why is Dustin Rhodes here? Really good stuff. Max Caster then runs in the ring, and MJF's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, Hangman. And then Hangman comes out. There's a stare down between Hangman and MJF. I really don't know where they're going with this, but I'm enjoying it. And then MJF goes back to cut this promo. Dustin Rhodes comes out and cuts a really babyface promo about how, him and Jeff Jarrett are the last of their kind, etc., etc. He berates MJF. Then Dustin Rhodes' drug issues are brought up. He brings it up himself. And then MJF, rather than turns it from a positive to a negative, which was really cleverly done. And then Dustin Rhodes just eventually goes whack and attacks MJF. And basically that comes after MJF says, which is a brilliant line again by MJF, saying, "You spent years getting out of your dad's shadow to only end up in your little brother's shadow." And it's just glory. It's so well. I love MJF, but really good stuff. MJF and Dustin Rhodes is set up for tonight, actually. Then we have Toni Storm versus Queen and Marta. Toni Storm dresses up as Mariah May. This is genius, and looks.
I did see that, yeah.
Looks a spitting image, and literally wrestles like her for the rest of the match. Mariah May's going like barely speaking on commentary because she's just so livid. It is brilliant. This is Toni Storm at her best. They even announce her as this is Toni Storm playing the role of Mariah May, and then she comes out. It's really good, really good stuff. Mariah May, and like there ends up being a promo afterwards, and Toni Storm starts cutting it as if she is Mariah May. Mariah May gets annoyed, and there's nearly a brawl, but Mariah May just runs away and just is like, I'm sick to death of you. Really good stuff. Literally cannot. It's so good. Then we have the New York Minute, which is actually in the arena where Hobbs returns after being away for a little bit, and then there's an attack, and then the attack leads to the cameraman falling on the floor. It cuts to black. There's your break. It then goes to an ad break and then comes back later on. Really clever way of going to an ad break. That's why I wanted to mention that more than anything. And then we get to the main event: Swerve Strickland versus Ricochet. Ricochet attacked before the bell with a steel chair. Swerve ended up power bombing Ricochet on the barricade, which looked gnarly. It looked horrible. The crowd were going mental for this match. It's very different to what you would expect. As they mentioned before, this is more of a fight, not the usual. The usual what you would expect from these two. And it worked because what they did is they did the ground and pound. They did the power bombs on the barricades and stuff like that. They did it quicker. So they kept the speed of what they would usually do. Just rather than doing all flips, it was all just power moves and trying to take each other out, which was really well done. The Swerve stomp was kicked out of. You then had Ricochet missing a springboard, but he ends up trying to do a springboard over the top rope to DDT him on the apron, misses it, ends up turning him around into a German suplex. So it was a botch, but he turned it into something as gnarly as what he was going to do. It was brilliant stuff. And then Ricochet hits the spirit gun after a low blow. So you had Swerve go in for the stomp. As he went for the stomp, there was a kick to the gut. And Ricochet won after the spirit gun and then took the embassy robe that Swerve Strickland came down with. It was, really good episode of Dynamite. This, I no complaints whatsoever. All build into the pay-per-view. It seems to just get hotter and hotter.
Hallelujah. No complaints.
No.
What a time to be alive.
I really enjoyed this episode of Dynamite. It just, every segment mattered. I looking at my notes, there was not a single segment that didn't matter. And it's very rare you can say that about a wrestling show.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's great. I mean, again, like I said before, good shows means good stuff to watch, and that's what we want, isn't it? So, yeah, we'll get into Collision in a little bit, and then we'll get into some predictions for Grand Slam, because that's obviously just around the corner. So, before that, though, we'll go into SmackDown. Again, I'll run through the key points of the show. Overall thoughts on SmackDown this week wasn't the strongest show, I don't think. I think it was a bit of a weaker show than we've seen. Was it as bad as maybe as the pre-Rumble show? I'm not 100% sure, but we'll get into it. Let's get into the highlights anyway. So we start out the show with Jay coming out with his usual yeet stick, and then Cody comes out, and in all honesty with this segment, I'm kind of glad that we aren't getting this as the match at Mania. It just felt a bit off in terms of the delivery of the promos, and I wasn't necessarily concerned with Jay. It was more on Cody's side, because sort of reminiscing about obviously what him and Jay did as tag champs and sort of the Liberations line and all this stuff that kind of came out of Cody wasn't particularly great in my opinion. It got saved for me when Fatu came out with Tama Tonga and started laying his usual smackdown, no pun intended, and telling Jay that basically the title's coming back to the family, but you're not going to be the one to essentially bring it back, which I thought was a great line. The one other issue I had was that Cody's telling everybody limping into the arena, I've got issues, I've got fluid on my shoulder, I've got my hip out of place, various other cuts and bruises from the KO match, which you would expect with how brutal it was. But then within 2 seconds of that, he's then doing a Cody cutter off the middle rope to Fatu in the middle of the ring, bandaged up and this, that, and the other. And I'm just kind of like, that doesn't really... I'm not necessarily one of those guys that everything has to make sense. But when you've just given off a long list of stuff that's wrong with you, maybe don't be doing Cody cutters off the rope. And then it kind of gets further embellished when you have the tag team match at the end with Cody involved and bandaged up still and pulling off the moves that he is. But again, that's just maybe me being a little bit picky. So then we had a couple of qualifying matches as well for the Elimination Chamber. We had Bianca and Alexa Bliss getting into the Chamber match. So that's starting to look pretty stacked in terms of that lineup. And the men's is as well, which I'll get into next, because the next match was Drew versus Jimmy versus LA Knight. And again, not just the match, but leading up into the match, you had the 3 promos from Drew, from Jimmy, and from LA Knight. And all 3 were great, in my opinion. You had Drew talking about him going home angry after the Rumble, driving home, waking up next to his hot wife, looking at himself in the mirror and saying, why are you so angry? Like, everything's great. Like, why am I so angry all the time? And then he realized it's because of the bald idiot Adam Pearce. And then he needs to leave Raw, moves to SmackDown, and now he's going to be happy guy, go lucky Drew, apparently. I'm sure that'll be over very quickly and in the blink of an eye. And then Jimmy came out and held his own as well. I've always felt Jimmy was probably the better promo out of Jay and him, but he's never really been able to show it. And I think him coming out and basically saying that Drew is a crybaby all the time and is like complaining all the time, and you know, I can say yeet as well, and I can say no yeet, and I can do all these things that Jay can. I thought he was more than holding up his end of the bargain with Drew and LA Knight on the mic. And then LA Knight came out and did his usual LA Knight shtick, had a very important message about mental health at the start of it as well, which was great to hear. And then at the end of the promo, calling, was it Drew... what was it? Drew Crybaby or something like that?
No, Drew McIntyre.
Drew McIntyre, that was the one, which I thought was a great line. And then even a cheeky little nod to the internet rumors of him, I didn't get all my stuff in. Cuts to Drew, who's then smirking as well. So that was a nice little touch as well. And to be fair, the match I thought was great as well. Again, nice back and forth action. Again, like triple threats. They have a tendency to either be brilliant or go off the rails, and I thought this leaned towards not necessarily being brilliant, but was great overall. Everyone got their stuff in, as LA said in his promo. And again, the way it ended, I thought was great, with Drew winning with a Claymore into Knight's finisher, which took out Jimmy and Knight at the same time, and then Drew got into the Chamber. And my last thought on it was, honestly, I wouldn't mind an LA Knight and Drew McIntyre rivalry.
I've been thinking this.
Yeah.
The rumors are Priest and Drew going into Mania. After everything we've just had with the Royal Rumble and this, stuff it. Change plan. Because I think the crowd would be well into an LA Knight Drew McIntyre match.
Yeah.
And if anything, it could be a way of giving Drew a win if they want to, because he hasn't won in a while, hasn't built up that momentum. So if they want him to come out of Mania looking strong, you can still have Knight lose and it not affect Knight, or you can give Knight a big victory if you want to. But yeah, I think the crowd would be way more into. I mean, they've got a lot of work to do to get to the Priest McIntyre match, and to have it overtake what is currently the online interest in LA Knight and Drew, because they had that little mini fight that looked a bit shooty in the middle of the match, and everyone went wild. They loved it.
yeah, exactly. And I think when you look at what they could potentially build with, 2 great guys on the mic, 2 great storytellers, the matches themselves would be great, because again, Knight and Drew do good stuff, and I'm sure they would have the chemistry as shown in this triple threat to do good stuff. So I just think even if it was maybe a more long-term one, I think it would be a great rivalry to have. So Drew gets into Elimination Chamber. You then had a quick KO promo in the car. Again, seems to do his best work in a car. Very strange. Where he's talking about Sammy's betrayal, and he's basically going to make him pay for it. Again, very cold promo, but it sold it really well. And I think, again, watch out, Sammy. Even though you're currently lying on your back, resting up, KO's coming for you, basically. And then we had Charlotte Flair come out. And again, my notes say that this was better than the Raw segment with Rhea, and it was. Because, again, she played more into the heel side of things and being better than everybody else and the usual Charlotte Flair stick. So she played to the strengths that we expect of Charlotte Flair. And I think my favourite line in this particular interaction with her and Tiffy was, when I was talking to Rhea, I saw a kid. And when I'm talking to you, I'm seeing a child begging me to take the match, basically. Which I thought was a great line and was a nice way to sort of separate Tiffy and Rhea and sort of set things up nicely. And then, of course, you had Nia come out and do her usual stick again. Quite funny. And I loved how when Candice was holding the ropes, was like, "You're so sweet." Like, I just thought it was great. I love what Nia does with her character stuff. And we'll see, although we expect Tiffy to beat Nia next week on SmackDown, we'll see what that ends up with. But it very much looks like Flair and Tiffy is the way they're going for WrestleMania, much like everyone expected. And we'll see what happens and confirmation of that in the coming weeks. And then we had main event time, which was Cody and Jay versus Jacob and Tama. Again, didn't really think there was anything special here. Jacob got his stuff in. I don't think there was anything out of the ordinary here. Cody ended up getting the win, which I didn't necessarily think was the right move, personally, because I do think they need to do a bit more building with Jay in the matches department. Obviously not with the crowd reaction, but just building him winning matches and getting pins is kind of important for him, I think. And then we closed the show with Cody getting the pin and then getting attacked by Solo, who came out of nowhere and out of the woodwork. And of course, that leaves many questions as to what happens next, because obviously, what does that mean with Jacob Fatu, and what does that mean with obviously the Bloodline 2.0 and all that stuff? And of course, does that mean Solo's going to get a match against Cody, maybe at a Chamber? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, overall, SmackDown, it had good moments. I think the Drew, Jimmy, LA Knight part was probably the highlight for me. Again, just that entire promos into the match was pretty great, that sort of 20-25 minutes. But yeah, overall, I think SmackDown was one of the poorer ones we've had since we started the pod. But yeah, it kind of continued a few details, but didn't give anything sort of revolutionary or revelatory, I should say. But yeah, that was SmackDown, really. Any thoughts on SmackDown yourself there, Bragster?
For me, it's just with the Solo stuff, I don't care. Because that like, we saw it so much towards the start of Cody's reign that I don't care to see it again now. Like, there's been no progression on the Cody Solo front to warrant this again. The entire reason this is happening, and I'm hoping the reason it's happening, is to lead to a Jacob Solo match at Mania. I presume that's where it's going to go. Given the fact that this is probably, as you said, going to cause tension because he's just been away, and then if he gets a title match, well, Jacob's going to be like, well, what, where have you been? Like, that you could end up with a cool moment there, but it's just, I just don't care. I just don't care about that title match. I don't like. It's not even a fun one. Like, for me, if you're going to have Cody have a title match at Elimination Chamber, give it to a mid-card guy who is going to lose, but is a bit of fun, or they've got to just do something interesting, because I just don't care.
Fair enough. No, I think it's like I said last week in the pod, there's a long way to go still between Mania and where we are now. And I think there's still got to be some padding there in terms of where we get to. And obviously you're not going to have full blown out rivalries happen between now and then. You're obviously going to have some bits and pieces have to fall into place and maybe have the odd one-off matches with people. some of the decisions they've made this week kind of surprised me, like having the Nia and Tiffy match just as a throwaway match was kind of like, oh, okay. I thought we might visit that at a later point. It's somewhere down the line. But of course they've went with that decision, and I'm sure it'll be a great match because again they're both great at the minute, both Nia and Tiffy. So yeah, we'll see where it ends up. So that was it for this week's SmackDown. So with that being said, SmackDown passed by, but we head straight into the weekend and we have Collision. So Bragster, take us away, old chap.
Well, the show started off quite weirdly. The commentators were just running through the show, and then randomly, like, a security guard gets thrown across the screen, and Marina Shafir has clearly thrown that security guard. And then Moxley comes down, and Moxley cuts a weird promo basically saying that he's not going to give Cope the title shot, and basically threatens to break Cope's neck. And that was kind of it. There was no real progression. This kind of felt like a middle of the show promo rather than a start of the show promo. It was kind of, it was a weird part of the show in what eventually ends up being a very good show. Then we have the Undisputed Kingdom versus Daniel Garcia, Corhan, and Daddy Magic versus Shane Taylor Promotions, a triple threat tag trios ordeal, right? My first note, I still hate it in a triple threat tag match when there's not 3 people that start in the ring. I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's been a trend in wrestling for like the last 5-6 years, if not longer, where they changed the rule, and I don't know why they changed the rule, and it's stupid. Change it back. I don't like it.
I think we should keep it the same.
No. In the end, contrary to what I'm just saying, it was a very good match and was actually well done for the match that was going about it. Shane Taylor mimics at one point the Adam Cole baby into Shane Taylor, bitch, which was really funny. Really, really, like, I didn't really know that Shane Taylor could do the more comedic side. That was really good. Daddy Magic goes on comms during this match at one stage. The commentators are like, do you not want to help out during the match? And he's like, I've got the TNT champion on my team. He doesn't need the help. He's the champion. And then eventually his team are getting battered. And he's like, sorry, guys, I've got to go. And then ends up like joining the match sort of again. Really good comedic moments in between what is some brilliant wrestling. Like the chemistry between these teams is so obvious. It's like, obviously over the last few weeks, they've been going at it here and there. It's so obvious. It's just, there was just a big brawl, and then everyone's doing like tag team moves, and you've got like the Shatter Machine ended up being hit at one point, I think, and then you ended up with like loads of like classic tag finishes sort of being hit, which was just really cool. Until eventually Adam Cole hits the boom to pick up the win. He ends up pinning, I think it was Sean Dean, but it honestly could have been Charlie Bravo from Shane Taylor Promotions. I don't know which one. But Garcia's crawling into the ring, and there's a really cool moment where Adam Cole's like, I've won. And Garcia's face is like, uh-oh, because he's obviously fears Adam Cole going for his championship. I think I would quite like to see an Adam Cole triple threat with Shane Taylor and Garcia. I think that would be magnificent. And if that's where they go for Revolution, inject that into my veins. so good. Then the Death Riders end up attacking the Undisputed Kingdom, and this came out of nowhere. And basically on Dynamite, it's Undisputed Kingdom versus the Death Riders for the trios titles. Like like next week, it just came out of nowhere. Cole said that they picked the wrong trio, and honestly, I don't know who's going to win that match. That could go either way. Then we end up having Bandido's return to the ring against Brian Keith. Really, really fun match again here. It starts really hot and really hard hitting for these two, and it just continued that way throughout. Like every move just felt like you were just sitting there going, ooh, like, you know, so good. At one point there was Brian Keith did like a release suplex. Like I think it was more like a Germany, but yeah, he just did a full-blown release suplex from the top rope. It looked gnarly again. It just brilliant stuff. Then at one stage, like after they hit each other, they were both in the middle of the ring, back to back, and they stand up, and you've got Bandido, who's the most wanted, Brian Keith the bounty hunter, and they both look at each other and they walk 10 paces to each corner and do the classic duel. They turn around, both go for a missile dropkick, both hit each other and both down on the floor. Really, really good moment. The crowd went berserk for that. It was so, so good. Like, this is what I like to call like a fun match. You were just watching it, enjoying yourself. Like, it doesn't have many consequences, but this is just a fun, really enjoyable match. And then eventually Bandido ended up winning, and I didn't catch the name of the finisher because I'm not very familiar with Bandido. This is his first match, I think, in like 18 months or something ridiculous, and so I haven't really seen Bandido, not familiar with his Ring of Honor work. But he hits this amazing German suplex as his finisher, where he hits the ropes, ends up like, it's really hard to explain, but he ends up flipping over his opponent who's holding onto the ropes. And as he flips back, the momentum takes him to just fully German suplex them. And it looks magnificent. Really, really good. And yeah, really, really good stuff. And Bandido gets the victory, and Brian Keith doesn't end up getting the cash prize that Chris Jericho promised him for beating the most wanted. Really, really enjoyable match between these two. Like, Brian Keith has always been one of my favorites since being in AEW. He kind of proved it here. And Bandido, to someone who's not used to watching him, I'm now a fan of Bandido. I want to see more Bandido matches. Then we end up having a bunch of squash matches. So I'll just tell you the people that ended up having squash matches. You ended up having Dustin Rhodes, LFI, which includes Roosh, Driglisco, etc. in that one, and Mariah May has one later, but I'll come to that in a minute. Basically, in the LFI squash match, Hologram returns. They ended up doing like the Sin Cara thing of having blue lighting. I hope that's just for his return, because I bloody hate lighting in wrestling. I hate it. I don't like it if it's red. I don't like it if it's blue. I don't like it if it's green or turquoise. I don't care what color it is, right? I don't like lighting because it makes it really hard to see on camera. It makes it really hard to see in the arena. I don't mind it for the return, but please don't continue to do that. Then we have the Harley halftime show where the Mercedes Moné puppet returns.
Hey!
Harley in this ends up singing the song Money Train, and then it ends up getting interrupted after a good minute or two of fun singing by Harley Cameron, by Mercedes Moné. There was a really good camera shot at one point where Mercedes Moné is about to walk into the ring, and she stops by the steps just to taunt the crowd. But what she doesn't realize is in the background, it says Moné is overrated, and overpaid. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, that, like, it was a very obvious like shot as well, where like an unfortunate shot. But yeah, Mercedes is weird. Some places she gets crowd reaction, some places she doesn't. She's in a weird one at the moment. I don't think the character's quite hitting at the moment. But yeah, at one stage, Harley Cameron nearly says the CUNT word, and like ends up changing it. So she starts singing a song and changes that word. Really, really good stuff. And then she starts singing Feel the Wrath. Mercedes then cuts her off. Basically says that she's a bad wrestler, you know, this, that, and the other. And Harley says that Moné was the most entertaining when her hand was up her puppet ass, which is just a brilliant line. And then hits Mercedes Moné with the microphone, and the match is confirmed for Grand Slam. Mercedes accepts it. Harley Cameron gets her match in her home country with Mercedes Moné. Really, really good stuff. We had a face-off between Matthews and Okada, but that just progressed that. We had a match between Thunder Rosa and Penelope Ford. Not much to really write home about. It was a methodical match, very average match. Thunder Rosa ended up picking up the win there, and Megan Bayne ended up coming down and attacking her after the match. So I think we're going into a program with Thunder Rosa and Megan Bayne. We then had a heel Ricochet promo. He's really improving on the promo front, which is great to see. We have a Mariah May glamorous exhibition match where basically Mariah May comes down and her opponent is miraculously looks very similar to Toni Storm.
Weird. Strange.
Weird that. Mariah May absolutely batters this person, like this local talent who's obviously dressed up as Toni Storm. And then Mariah May after the match dresses her more like Toni Storm and puts more clothes on her. Then Luther returns, comes down and with a tray, takes off the cloche, and there's a shoe underneath, which is obviously very much Toni Storm's thing. And then Mariah May picks up the shoe, threatens to hit Luther, turns around, goes to pick up the person on the floor. It's no longer her opponent. It's Toni Storm. She did the switcheroo, which was just genius stuff. And then Toni Storm ends up battering her and Mariah May runs off. Really, really good stuff. Toni Storm has been comedy gold this week, both in and out of the ring. Really, really good stuff. We then had Don Callis attack backstage. Davis looked very conflicted again. And then we have an unbelievable match. You have Mark Briscoe versus Karl Fletcher. Fletcher attacks straight away. There's suicide dives. Briscoe is busted open terribly, like dripping blood. It's glorious. Briscoe nearly gets Fletcher through the table, but ends up getting cut off. There's a great double clothesline spot, like loads of spots where basically Briscoe's head's just getting more and more busted open. There's huge kickouts by Briscoe. Really, really good showing. Briscoe ends up sending Fletcher through the table with an amazing dive. So basically he jumps from the top rope and does a crossbody through and ends up going through the table. Really, really nice stuff. Like there's a huge Fletcher kick out after a diving elbow, which came from the table spot. I honestly thought that could have been it, which would have been a massive surprise the week before next week. And then there was a top rope brainbuster from Karl Fletcher, gets the win on Mark Davis. Again, just going on the big cut on his head, and it ends up just being the finishing move. It's not just normal finishing move, but it works in this sense. And that's the end of your show. I literally wrote, what an episode, great TV. That is the best episode of Collision this year. It was from top to bottom, the matches were incredible. Really, really good stuff.
Best Collision of the year.
Yeah.
Good Lord. We are living in exciting times, people, when Collision is living up to the hype. And speaking of hype, Grand Slam is round the corner, so it is time for some predictions from our AEW correspondent in the island of pinkness that he currently sits in. It is Bragster. So Grand Slam is on the way. We've got 5 matches for you to predict, Bragster. Mm-hmm. Anything less than 5, and I will be disappointed. So let's start from the top. We've got Mariah May versus Timeless Toni Storm for the AEW Women's World Championship. Who's taking home the belt?
Toni Storm's winning this one. As I said, I'm going to go quick fire. Toni Storm's winning this one for the matter of the fact of Mariah May won in her hometown. Toni Storm's going to win in her hometown, and we're going to eventually have a third match between the two of them. Everything's building to a big Timeless Toni Storm win. They're going to do it. That's going to be, spoiler alert for possible later predictions, but that is going to be the big Australian pop. That could possibly end up being the main event. It's between that and one of the matches later on that could be the main event. And yeah, this is going to be a big pop for the Australian crowd. Timeless Toni Storm is taking it home.
Okay. Next up, we have Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega versus the Don Callis family. Who's winning that one?
This is really tough because I honestly think it could go either way, but I'm going to go with Ospreay and Omega. I think they could prove the switcheroo and end up having Omega lose really early on his return, but I think that they're not going to do that. I think that you're going to have a couple of other matches that don't go the nice way for the crowd, that I feel like they're going to give this one the big babyface win. I honestly think that, you know, this is the one I'm least confident on the entire show. But yeah, I think that this is going to go in the direction of the faces, but I could quite easily see the numbers game coming into it, and we actually see a shock loss for the two megastars.
Okay, and third up for the next title match we have on the card, we've got Mercedes Moné versus Harley Cameron for the TBS Women's Championship.
This is one of the matches that I referred to earlier as not going in the way that the crowd want. Harley Cameron is going to have all of the support in the world, and Mercedes Moné is going to break all of their hearts. She's currently 4 bouts Moné. that's not going to change. I don't think the 4 belts Monet thing is going to change just yet. I think that she hasn't appeared in the likes of Rev Pro or whatever since. And I feel like I think we're going to have where she appears in all of these promotions and defends the belts while having all of the belts. We haven't quite got to that yet. Unfortunately, as much as she's popular, this is not Harley Cameron's time, but this is a great, great moment to show what she can do in the ring.
Absolutely. Okay. And then second last match, we've got Okada versus Buddy Matthews for the Continental Championship.
This is another one that I think is not going to go in the way of the crowd, which is why I think the babyface wins are going to come elsewhere. Okada's going to win this one. I think that there was a big hint in the little promo off that I referred to earlier that Okada is actually going to show his mean streak a lot more. I think Buddy Matthews is going to bring it out of him. I think we're going to see a more serious version of Okada in this match be brought out of him because of Buddy Matthews. I think this is going to be really hard hitting. I think this could be match of the night and probably should be match of the night. And yeah, it's going to be magnificent, going to be the match that everyone talks about. But Okada's walking out of this one. This is not the right time for Okada to lose that bout.
Okay. And last but certainly by no means least, we have Jay White and Cope. He's going to sit on that one for Brex's pleasure.
Cope.
Let's see if he can cope with it. Versus the Death Riders of Moxley and Claudio in a Brisbane brawl.
I referred to it this earlier, actually in both senses. Number one being that this is the other match that could end up finishing the show. I think it's between this match, because again, big hardcore ending, obviously the main event scene currently in AEW, or the hometown hero getting their crowning moment. I think it could end either way. I think either way would be a very good ending to the show. I think they should be bookended as well. I think one should start and one should end the entire show. Either that or you may shove this in the middle, but I feel like they don't want the main event scene to be shoved in the middle of the show. Anyway, what I've referred to earlier as well is I think Cope is actually going to pin Jon Moxley in this one. I think that's where we're going to go. I think Jon Moxley is going to suffer a very rare loss, and that's going to lead to Jon Moxley wanting his revenge eventually and accept the Revolution match. Cope and Jay White are winning the Brisbane Brawl.
And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Brax's expertise and predictions. Or is it a spoiler for Grand Slam? You see what I did there. We'll have to wait and see. So, again, good week. Great week, it sounds like, for AEW. So,
honestly, phenomenal. I have to say, from watching the WWE product and the AEW product, I can safely say that the AEW product this week was better for me. And yeah, I think they've really built into me being excited for Dynamite tonight and then Grand Slam later this week. I'm really excited to see what they do, because the matches this week have been brilliant.
Awesome. Okay, no worries then. We'll leave it there for AEW, and we'll round off the weekly roundup with a bit of Monday Night Raw. So, Raw happened. That was a thing on Netflix. Let's get into it, and let's give us the highlights of what went down. So, we started off like we did in SmackDown, with Jey Uso coming out through the crowd, yeeting left, right, and center. Michael Cole and his glorious co-commentator Pat McAfee were yeeting everywhere as well. He goes for the redo, goes onto the announce desk, and then, using an interesting camera angle, gets attacked by Gunther. Though it does look like, if you had it on mute, it would have looked like he'd fallen on his backside and slipped over on the desk. But obviously with commentary they were saying, Jey, look out, he's coming! And then it was Gunther essentially attacking Jey during the yeeting phase. And my best note that I can say on this was that they were finally getting some heat on Gunther, which feels like it could actually last rather than being sort of a flash in the pan sort of thing. And that's exactly what we need heading into Mania, because at times Gunther has felt very cold. Not necessarily me saying that I don't enjoy Gunther's work. I love Gunther, but they need to do more in terms of making him be the bad guy in this scenario and not just the guy who holds the belt that Jey needs to take it off. And I think this was a perfect way to do it. after the beatdown, Jay then gets on the mic and says, "I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to face you at Mania." And then essentially we get it confirmed that Jay is facing Gunther at Mania. Bragster, your thoughts?
This was such a good segment. Like I've heard some people be like, "Oh, it's just a basic attack." No, it's not. This is so good. Like this is like you have the encore on Monday, you have the encore on SmackDown. The ballsiness of WWE to plan an entire segment on the crowd asking for an encore again, like based off of something that they didn't know was going to happen last Monday. So this is something they've planned very recently, and the ballsiness to do it and then to execute it as well as they did was just really, really good. And I also just love Jay's like, I probably shouldn't do this. I really shouldn't do this. And you could just see that the almost like I could regret this decision. And that's how it should feel when facing Gunther. It should, like, most people should be like, oh, I don't want to face Gunther at Mania. Do you get what I mean? I don't want to face Gunther for the title, but I have to because I'm on this brand. So this is my only way of winning the world title. He has the choice. So to have Jay be like, I'm choosing to face this guy, and you can see that on his face. It's just it's so good at putting over Gunther while also making Jay look like the valiant babyface. I think this, as you mentioned with the Gunther getting some heat, this is such a clever segment of making Jay look like a bigger babyface than he already is, and making Gunther look like a bigger heel than he already is. This elevated both guys for me.
Absolutely. And quick question: does Jay win at Mania?
Damn right he does.
Okay.
Like, damn right he does. It's his crowning moment. This is the moment. They wouldn't do it again if it wasn't going to be his moment. And I think rightfully so. I don't think it's going to be the longest reign. I think this is going to be very much Kofi Mania type ordeal where he wins and probably loses it by SummerSlam. But I honestly think that, I know Kofi's went on for longer before you can do that.
You knew I was going to say it, didn't you?
I knew what you were going to say. But
there's not many times I get to make a correction, Bragster, so I have to take my opportunities when they come.
It was around that time, and you know it.
It was Survivor Series, wasn't it?
No, because it was the Fox debut with.
Which was just before Survivor Series.
It was not far before, but
you said SummerSlam. That's like 2 months prior. Like
a month, 2 months. Who cares? But shut up. But I think that I don't think he's going to hold it for very long. I don't think it's going to be the longest title reign. I think this is very contrary to the title reigns that have been happening recently. I actually think this is going to be one of the shorter ones, but I think they're going to capitalize on the crowd reaction, give this big moment at Mania, give Jay that big singles title that he rightfully deserves. And you can end up having some fun matches out the back end of it, and end up having someone else beat Jay, and they beat the biggest babyface, and you can make a new heel sort of thing. Someone get booed out the building. It could even be Drew's moment to really ruin that party if they really want to. I know he's on a different brand right now, but let's be honest, it's going to be a draft literally 2 weeks after Mania. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be his kind of moment.
Okay, no worries. Right. So, from there, we had the qualifying match for the Elimination Chamber, which went exactly as we predicted last week, where Bayley qualified with the roll-up on Lyra Valkyria. I'm trying to pronounce that right because I've been butchering the pronunciations every single week. But Bayley got the win, and yeah, there was a bit more of a reaction coming out for Valkyria this week, which was nice to see. There was a bit more, crowd interaction, which is good. And then moving on from that, we had personally, my match of the week in WWE, which was the Io Dakota versus Liv Raquel tag match. Again, particular props to Io and Liv spots when they were fighting each other. Liv actually got busted open at one point, which looked pretty gnarly. But she seemed to be all right by the end of it, so that's the main thing. And then we got a strange confirmation after this, which I was very surprised by. We got confirmation that after the Raw, after the Elimination Chamber, we're getting Io versus Rhea, which was very interesting. because I thought they were going to find a way to shoehorn Io into the chamber match.
So did I. I thought they were going to start like they did a few years ago with the triple threat in the middle of the Elimination Chamber. But yeah, no.
No, they seem to be giving that out for free on Raw, which will be interesting to see. Because again, it might be one of those things where we presume it's going to be a match, but there may be some shenanigans where someone gets taken out or Io gets taken out by someone else, and then we go from there. But we'll see. Again, Io on a nice little streak at the minute in terms of her matches and how she's coming across, which is great to see. Next up, we had AJ Styles return with the usual "I'm back" promo. I thought I was out with this injury and it was over, but I'm back. Gets interrupted by the great Dominic Mysterio, booed out the building.
Yeah.
That's up for debate. Dominic obviously comes out, and then they set up a match with Dominic and AJ for next week. And then there was a little bit of touchiness with the Judgment Day in the background of Finn basically telling them, no more new people coming in. I don't want anyone else in Judgment Day. And Dominic, you're going to go sort out your own business because you stirred it up with AJ, so it's up to you to sort it out, basically, which all made sense. And then, of course, on top of that, we've got Finn and Seth next week, which should be a load of fun because them two together are just fantastic. And then we had main event time where Logan Paul interrupted Punk. Bit of backwards forwards there, and like Punk said, he'd almost forgotten that he was a thing in WWE. So yeah, and then Logan did his usual heel shtick in that promo, and then Ray came out. And to be fair, and I hate to be that guy, but I have to give props to Logan Paul. It was a good match, and to be fair, if not the match of the week, there certainly was probably the move of the week in this one for me, with the moonsault batteram or batterer or whatever it was called.
I don't know, but it looked gnarly. It was awesome.
Cole had a name for it, and it was like, I've never heard that name before, but we'll go with it. And him essentially moonsaulting with Ray in his arms, and then like I've never seen that before. And again, like I said before, he's been really good in spots. Like when he has his spot and he has to do something, he pulls it off. And this is sort of the first time I think I've seen him in a proper length match where, again, he's in a legend with Mysterio, so he's probably going to have a good match, you know what I mean? But he held his own and did his bits perfectly. And it was a good main event. And again, continues a good run of main events for Raw. Again, my main question is it inevitable at this point that he's going to win one of those big belts?
Yeah.
I feel like it's inevitable, isn't it?
And the big reason why it's a yes isn't necessarily like now. It's his age. He's so young. He's got another 10. If he wants to do this full time, which from his podcast, from his social media, from everything that he's been saying, this is, and he even refers to it in a promo during the ad break. He literally says, I don't need the money. I don't need the fame. Like, I'm here for me. And I truly believe that is the case. I truly believe that, he's always been a WWE fan. That's been very clear from his videos in the past. And, he's here for a long time. He wants to be here for a long time. And if he's here for the next 10, 15 years, how do you not put it on him at any point? Because he's only going to improve in the ring, and he can already do things that a lot of wrestlers can't dream of. And that's no disrespect to other people, but that, he's got an athletic ability that, and especially for his height and athletic ability, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those that with his extra popularity as well, I don't think you can not put it on him at some point. I do think he should win the mid-card belt again before the Hand. But I think it would be inevitable that he wins, again.
I think one of two things will happen. Either he's the one to take it off Jay.
Yeah.
Or he wins Money in the Bank.
Interesting.
Because I think I know there's a lot of people that are saying Cena for Money in the Bank. I genuinely have a feeling that Cena might win Elimination Chamber, and they might just go give him the main event for his last Mania, and let him and Cody just have at it. I generally think that's the way that they might go. I will change it if he doesn't win it, and I'll be like, Cena's winning Money in the Bank.
Yeah.
But I just think if you give Logan that Money in the Bank briefcase, there is so much you could do in terms of building to that moment of him cashing in, and you could do it at any. It doesn't even. You don't have to have Logan cash it in at a big pay-per-view. You could do it like Jay's broken, bloodied, and beaten after he's faced, I don't know, Drew McIntyre or someone like that. Logan just strolls in. It's like, done. Yeah. I'm champion now. Deal with it. And then you have that run of, I'm really good at this. You all know I'm good at this, but you hate the fact that I've got it. Like, I don't want to see it. Like, I've made it no bones about it. I do not like the guy. His history is everything that it is. And I would rather him not have the belt. But of course, in terms of story and things like that, there will be many people who will say that he should have it. And Triple H probably is one of those people. Yeah. So, yeah, that's how I can envision it happening. But yeah, it would still hurt if he took it off Jay. So that was Raw, really. Again, good matches. Was better than SmackDown, I would say. Had some good segments in there as well. Didn't really have a lot of complaints with Raw, but I still don't think it was brilliant, per se, like you're saying with like Collision or whatever. I think it was good.
I actually agree with you on that one. Like I'm not looking at the show and my notes and going, oh, that was bad or anything. There wasn't like anything bad, but there wasn't anything that I went away and was like, that's the standout moment I'm taking away, or that's like, you know, I'm gonna next week, if you ask me what happened, I'm gonna be able to be like, oh, this happened and this. Like, it was very much a good show. Nothing bad, but nothing great either. I'm gonna be last in my memory for a while.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, that was Raw in review. That was the whole week in review, in fact. And we've got a couple more segments to get through, and we'll be wrapping up. So we'll take it to Wrestler of the Week. So, Bragster's favourite segment of the week is here.
Yes.
Would you like to introduce us, Bragster? Because I know you'd like to have a little introduction for this.
This is Taking the Pins Wrestler of the Week.
Don't know why your eyes went all Undertaker on us there when you did that, but okay.
You know, I thought I'd treat the viewers who are watching on video and not just listening.
Yeah.
Who's listening are going to be like, what?
Yeah, I could hear his eyes rolling down the mic.
To be honest, you probably could. Yes, it's Wrestler of the Week. This is the segment where we pick individually our Wrestler of the Week to add them to the table that we'll eventually review as the year goes on. This is everything, including matches and segments, because sometimes someone has a very, very good segment and doesn't necessarily have a match. So we're including all of it. So Grimmy, who is your Wrestler of the Week?
I will not be voting for Logan Paul out of principle. But I will be going for Io Sky because, again, I said earlier in the review, Io's tag team match with Dakota and Liv and Raquel was my match of the week, and I think Io was the main component of that, with a bit of backup from everybody else, if not main backup being Liv. But I just think Io's on such a good streak at the moment, and everything she does match-wise seems to be turning into gold, and I think this week was a further indicator of how highly everyone sees her, especially Triple H and WWE, and yeah, I thought she just had a great match.
Yeah, I mean, completely fair. Completely great choice. Shame, I really wanted you to go for Logan for a second and just completely go against your morals.
My morals are still intact, thankfully.
For myself, was a really tough one. And I wrote down it was I'm pretty much deciding on the spot here. Because it was between, for me, Mark Briscoe, who just put on the performance of a lifetime in that match with Karl Fletcher, bleeding everywhere from almost day dot of that match, and then putting on an absolute barn burner, and then Tony Storm for being just magnificent, and that's why I'm going to go with Toni Storm.
Right. Okay.
I think Toni Storm the other week kind of got robbed a little bit from not being the wrestler of the week, and I said the main reason for that is possibly because she didn't have a match and the other person did. For me, with this one, she did have a match. She dressed up as Mariah May, which is just magnificent. Wrestled as Mariah May, which again is magnificent, and just put on an absolute show. And then with the whole switcheroo, with Mariah May's match on Collision, was just chef's kiss. Just every bit of the character work alongside the in-ring work. Toni Storm showing her talents over and over and over again. She more than deserves a Wrestler of the Week.
Fantastic. And I think that's our first both
That is our first both wrestlers being women, yeah.
Momentous occasion in the Taking the Pin history. I'm sure we'll reflect on this in 50 years' time. Like, do you remember when I'll be 82? Good Lord. So, yeah. Again, great contenders and great picks for Wrestlers of the Week, as always. I mean, they don't get there unless they have been great, I guess. So, yeah. So, with that being said, let's move on to the final topic of the podcast. And with Elimination Chamber only a few short weeks away, Bragster, take it away. Let's do an introduction for this one, because, you know, this was your idea.
Oh, yeah, yes, it was.
Yes, this was my idea. I remember now.
Thank you. Yes, it was my idea. Please praise me some more. Thank you.
I didn't say it was praise.
My ego is just increasing by the second, and obviously I'm humble as well. But incredibly. Yes, incredibly. But yes, as Elimination Chamber is nearing by the second, it was actually something that I saw on Twitter, a question that I saw on Twitter, and I'm starting to think it, and it kind of, I mean, there's a greater discussion we can sort of have with this, but should one of the Elimination Chamber matches at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view be a title match? And the main reason sort of being is for you know, a little while now, you're sort of going in, it's like, okay, whoever doesn't win the Rumble, the rest of the contenders will go into a number one contenders Elimination Chamber match and they'll face the champion. Which kind of hints at the fact that the champion is going to make it to Mania. If they make it into the Rumble as champion, they make it to Mania as champion. And I guess you could, and you know, especially as we're going into an Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, which right now has no matches announced other than the Elimination Chamber matches, despite the fact that we've got a women's title match on SmackDown next week. This week now, we've got a women's title match on the day after Elimination Chamber. You know, we don't know really what's happening with the men's title, but Gunther's tied up completely. So you've got to presume that the only main event title matches that could possibly be on that card is Cody versus Solo. It seems very much that the main titles are tied up. And in years gone by, you look at the likes of, you know, one of the best memories is, I think it might have been the 2011. I don't remember what year of the Chambers it was, but you had Edge in the one lose his title and then go on later on in the night and enter that chamber and end up winning it. You have last minute title changes. Kofi Mania wouldn't have happened without that Daniel Bryan Elimination Chamber match where he got all the way to the end and then it got snatched away. So, you know, basically, do you believe that the pay-per-view before Mania, the Elimination Chamber match, you should have one of the champions go through the toughest test on the road to WrestleMania?
It's one I've been stewing over because I am an advocate for a title match in the Chamber, but only when it calls for it, I guess. Like if you have, say, for example, like we've got what seemingly is brewing with the Intercontinental title, where you've got a few guys who've bumped into Braun and said, "Ooh, isn't that shiny? I'd like to have that." You've got AJ bumping into him this week. You had Penta last week. Sheamus is obviously around somewhere wanting his title to complete the Grand Slam. And then you've obviously got likes of Pete Dunne probably going to be in there, Ludwig Kaiser, all these guys.
No.
I think stuff like that sets up nicely for a title match at Chamber.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the way it's kind of landed this year, it wouldn't have really worked because I feel like putting Gunther in, if you put Gunther or Cody in now, you would have known what the outcome was going to be, and I think that kind of takes it away a little bit from the Chamber. If you know the guy going in who has the belt is coming out with it, the Chamber matches aren't that effective to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like with Cody and Gunther, you were realistic, depending on the people that were in there. Like, say, for example, if you had Gunther in there and Roman was in it, you would be about 99% certain that Roman's probably picking up that belt going into Mania, really. Based off the history, he's been the main event the past 5-6 years in a row, however many years it is. That's going to change. But really, at the minute, for Gunther especially, there isn't really that many contenders for it. And I feel like everything's being pinned towards Cody now. And, of course, we now know with Raw having just happened last night as the time of recording, we know Jay's obviously going after Gunther, so there isn't going to be anything else to go for in terms of slots there. So it makes all the sense in the world that this year, in particular for the men's side of things, that it is going to be all-you-can-eat buffet of contenders heading into that match to try and get to Cody. Because, again, so far we've got Punk, Cena, Drew, and my mind is blanking on the fourth. Who's the fourth? Who's the fourth? Who's the fourth?
Think about it.
Oh, it's him, Logan Paul. So you've got 3 really good contenders and Logan Paul in that match, and then you've got potentially Seth going into that match, or potentially Finn, who I think would be a fun addition in there. You've then got Damian, Braun, and Jacob going in potentially. So again, you're gonna have 6 potential contenders, all who realistically could win the match for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Even though everyone's hedging the bets on 1 or 2 of the names being the person to be the winner.
Yeah.
That itself sets up the Elimination Chamber match to be a bigger spectacle and a bigger roller coaster in terms of who's going to win it, because they could change their minds at the end, or they could stick with the plan. Whilst we knew when Vince was booking it, we knew generally who was going to win it 9 times out of 10. Apart from maybe when Bray Wyatt won it and won the belt that time, which was, again, a great match and a great moment overall for everybody. I think we can all agree. Pan it over to the women's side, and again, you've got yourself into a situation where Tiffy is probably facing Charlotte Flair after the interaction they had on SmackDown. But then with Rhea, you're now into a position where you've got a bunch of contenders who realistically could win the match. And the main contender everyone thought it was going to be is not in the match. Again, things can change. They can do a triple threat at the start and make it different and put EO in there and it would be a little bit different. But they're not going to do that when they've just announced a match is coming for them to. And I do think that I personally enjoy title matches in the Chamber. I am all for them when it makes sense.
Yeah.
This year is one of those few years, I think, where it doesn't make sense to have them. And I think having them as number 1 contenders matches makes sense because of the caliber of people that are going to be in there. If, for example, you had people who were not in the title picture remotely, like, I don't know, you had a Tozawa or an Otis or an R-Truth in there, or a Chad Gable who isn't in the title picture, then it's going to lessen it somewhat. And I think by having the stacked roster in there that you're going to have, like you did at the Rumble with the men's, because you don't know who's going to win, it gives it that much more suspense. And I think that's what makes the Elimination Chamber match as exciting as it is. So for me, this year, in the circumstances that we have, I think that makes it all the more exciting, having genuine contenders left, right, and center in both matches.
Yeah, I see what you mean. When you break it down like that, it makes a lot of sense. I'm a big advocate for title matches and chambers. I think that basically, I agree with you that this year it kind of doesn't make sense. But if I see it again next year, I'm going to be like, I'm going to almost accuse it of being lazy booking, because it kind of is. And how do we get to that? Oh, okay, let's just shove them all in the chamber. If it happens year on year, it becomes less exciting. This year it works because, as you said, we've got so many contenders, all of which could quite easily go on to face Cody, like very easily. Especially now we know it's Cody, it's even more interesting because you just know that's probably going to be the main event of night 2. So it's all the more interesting going into that one. The only thing I could possibly think of is you could have possibly put Rhea in there, because I think she's probably the least safe champion, which is a weird thing to say with Rhea Ripley, but she probably is the least safe champion in the sense of if you have that stacked thing of Bianca, Alexa, Io in there, with Liv Morgan in there, maybe let's say Raquel, or Bailey's in there. So you got that. So and you have all these. You could quite easily do the title switch and then the rematch with Rhea being the match at Mania or whatever. You could quite easily do that, or it ends up as some sort of triple threat stuff at Mania. Because of it, I think Rhea is probably the only main event card. But then you mentioned something that I hadn't even thought of, which is the mid-card bouts could have ended up in there.
Yeah.
And as you said, you the Intercontinental title scene is very packed, but the only argument with that is you don't want Penta losing, you don't want Styles losing, you don't want Braun losing yet. And if you're going to put the title on Sheamus, which I don't think is going to happen this Mania, but, we can all hope. But you do, if you did want to put the title on him at Mania, you wouldn't want him losing here. Unless you did the Kofi Mania style of all the way to the end and Braun destroys him at the end type thing of, and all of that. Then you look over at you look at the United States title picture, and that's one that I actually think would have worked really well, actually, because Shinsuke is not a safe champion, especially if you put in the likes of an LA Knight in there, Carmelo Hayes, Andrade. I think a Jimmy Uso is well deserved to be in the US title picture now. Yep. And you quite easily end up putting in one of the Bloodline 2.0 in there. You could easily end up, if you've got nothing for Priest to do or whatever, you can put Priest in there. And then that's how you get to Drew versus Priest, is that it ends up being a United States Championship match or whatever. There's all these different things that I think you could have done if the United States Championship was in there, and I think it would have been extremely unpredictable because no one really knows what the US title match is going to be at Mania. I think we can kind of put something together for the Intercontinental, but we've got no idea with the US. So I think the US title would have worked really well, and then easily could have put together one for the women's 2 mid-card bouts. If you want to establish a mid-card bout for the women's side, shove a bunch of the women in to an Elimination Chamber match and let them shine. Like, you could have quite easily done that and built a division just from one match, because yes, okay, it would have felt random with a few qualifying matches here and there, and you might not even have to do qualifying matches. You could have done almost how they did the first Elimination Chamber, where all these people are fighting and going after the same title, that the GM goes out and goes, do you know what? I've spoken with the other GM and they've granted me permission to do this. You're within the Elimination Chamber. That's how you're going to settle this. And then that's how it comes about, and I think they could have easily done that, especially for the Intercontinental side of things. For the women's side, with Lyra Valkyrie, could have had Ivy Nile in there, could have had Dakota Kai in there very easily. I'm definitely missing a few names that could have been, Maxine could have been there. There's loads of different options that they have, that they could have had to build a division, because that's something that they're struggling with in the women's mid-card division, is actually building one. And I think they could have done that really, really. I mean, they're doing it fine on SmackDown because the US title with Michin and and BFAB and stuff is sort of developing over there. Okay, but especially on Raw, they're struggling. I think for me, you could have quite easily put the women's Intercontinental title in there or the men's US title in there, both of which being unpredictable matches, both of which showcasing talent, both of which therefore putting on a title match in the sense of, and we all love the saying that happens in it, Elimination Chamber matches when the champion gets pinned and you go, and you're guaranteed a new champion. Like, that is one of the most exciting words in that match. And I think they could have quite easily have done it. And they haven't. I think that it's an interesting one for me because I think they could have. I think especially with the women's chamber, it's kind of just a glorified number one contenders match. Whereas the men's one, there feels like a load of weaving stories. With the women's one, so far out of the qualified people, the only winner is Liv. And I don't really care about Liv versus Rhea again. And to go through a chamber to get to that, and okay, you could end up with a triple threat with Liv, Rhea, and Io, which could be actually how they do it. But even then, there's that element of you could have just done that organically. You didn't need a chamber to get there. And you actually could have used that to showcase someone like a Lyra Valkyria in that mid-card division. Yeah, I think for me, I'm okay with it this year, but I do not want to see a trend of it because chamber matches were made for title matches. As much as they're enjoyable for the number one contenders matches, and I would quite enjoy the trend of one being a number one contenders and the other one being a title match, so you get two very different vibes from them both. So in one, you're like, okay, who are they going to face? And the next one, you're watching the champion being like, are they going to lose? Are they going to lose? And you can then book them very differently, and they can both be enjoyable in their own right. But yeah, I think for this year, I'll accept it, but I do not want to see it as a trend at all.
Yeah, the other thing about this year as well is before the Rumble and before we knew Charlotte Flair was coming back, I had said, I think I've said it on the podcast or I said it to you maybe in private, but I feel like or felt like the thing they should have done was put Tiffy in an Elimination Chamber match and have her defend it and have her win, because then you immediately set her up rocket ship straight away into Mania as she's beaten 5 other women to keep hold of this thing. Who the hell's going to be able to beat her? And I feel like having already announced, obviously, it's pretty much clear cut from the promos and from the segment that it's going to be Charlotte. I feel like having that mystery of over who the person's gonna pick is kind of been taken away this year, because Jay's within the second week has told us all what's going to happen. We've seen the interaction with Charlotte and Tiffy, so we know who both Rumble winners are taking. While we have had in previous years, the Rumble winners have sort of held off until Chamber's done in certain scenarios to be like, okay, I'm going to pick this person, or I'm taking this person, where that gives you a bit more flexibility. But obviously they've made the decisions they have, and I do think this year it does work having number one contenders, because again, I've always had an issue with WWE in the fact that they don't necessarily have enough number one contender matches. In that sense, they tend to just have, or they've had a long run of wins, we'll just put them in, or this is the story we're going to go with. And I feel like number one contender matches add something a little bit when there is a bit of mystery to it. And hopefully this year there is, I think on the women's side, there is a bit more up in the air as to who it could be. Yeah. If there's a person I'm suspecting it's going to be, it's Bianca, because I do think they really want that Rhea Bianca match. Whether it's a triple fetch or a fatal four-way or something else that they go with, time will tell. But I have that feeling that Bianca is going to be in there somewhere, because she has been on the sidelines. I say sidelines, tag titles with Naomi and Jade for a while, and they've done the perfect thing with her, where she hasn't been out the limelight, but she also hasn't been, I've had this belt, or I've been in contention with the belt. And she doesn't have that fatigue that Charlotte has, even though she's been away for 14 months. So I do think that's how maybe it's going to go. Obviously, I want to see all 6 people in the match first, because they may pull a Cena and just bring someone in who's not been seen for a while, like a Becky Lynch or someone like that. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think it's going to be. I am looking forward to the chamber matches, especially with what we've seen of who's going to be in it so far. I think we could have two of the best chamber matches we've ever seen, potentially, with the players that we've got in play at the minute.
No, I agree. I think it works for the star power that's there. in the sense of we are going to be treated to two very, very good matches, and we're going to be spoiled. Hopefully the rest of the card is going to be okay, because there's not long for until, it's only like 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks now until Chamber, and we have no other matches confirmed. The only other one that's been teased is the Cody solo match. I haven't really seen many others be teased, so I'd quite appreciate there to be something else. But yeah, I think that we're going to be treated to two it's similar to the Rumble, where we were treated to two very good Rumble matches. I think we're going to get two very good Chamber matches.
Yeah, absolutely. And fingers crossed that is the case. And of course, when the Chamber happens, we will be here reviewing it and letting you know our thoughts on it. And speaking of thoughts, if you do have any thoughts on any of the opinions or drivel that have come out of our mouths today, please let us know in the comments. Of course, we'd love to hear what you guys think. And as always, if you've enjoyed the episode, don't forget to leave a like if you're watching on YouTube. Maybe hit that follow button if you're listening on a podcast, on all those podcasting platforms that seem to be even more every week, that seem to be branching out. So again, hit that follow button. We greatly appreciate the support. And yeah, with that being said, we'll leave it for this week, and we will see you next week, where we'll be getting ever closer to Grand Slam. And
no, we'll be after Grand Slam.
Oh, it'll be after Grand Slam, so we'll have Grand Slam to review next week.
We'll know what's going on at Grand Slam. We would have known everything.
We'll be reviewing Grand Slam, ladies and gentlemen, even better, so we will catch you then for that review. And with that, I shall bid you farewell. Anything to add there, Bragster?
No, not at all. The one thing we possibly haven't mentioned is Vengeance Day is also this week, NXT Vengeance Day. So we'll be running through the results of that as well very, very quickly. But yeah, a lot of really good wrestling to look forward to this week. So can't wait.
Absolutely.
More good wrestling.
Fingers crossed. And hopefully AEW brings us a Grand Slam. And yeah, fingers crossed. And with that, folks, I shall bid you adieu, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks very much, and I'll see you soon.